and assuming they couldn't change, and that therefore whoever was running against Mr. Trump would win, that assumption is now officially dead. So the need to actually, for us to be organized and for us to win is shown to be 100% important. Because the future is uncertain, and the events will for sure happen. There will be more unforeseen events. I think what they're going to show is that this is a dangerous, reckless, and lawless man. So everybody in this room's assumptions are going to be stronger, but we cannot wait. And in addition, we can't wait for Mr. Mueller. You know, I'm entirely behind the Mueller investigation. God bless Robert Mueller. Absolutely. Go do it, man. But we have more than enough information now, and once again, these legal scholars, to start impeachment today, and we need to start impeachment today, and we need to tell the Congress they need to start impeachment today. Look, right now, you know, I don't know if you guys remember, but Mr. Trump said when he was running that he could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and no one would care. And I was like, okay, that's crazy. Well, it turns out that he has shot people on Fifth Avenue and no one's cared. The only way it seems that people take that as murder is if Robert Mueller comes out and says, well, that's murder. We need to have the courage of our own convictions that when we see deceit and lawlessness and criminality in the White House, that the body which is constitutionally supposed to oversee the presidency, the Congress, has the courage of its convictions to call it out for what it is and to act. So the reason that I'm doing this, and I assume the reason that you're doing this is the right thing to do. And it is, look, I've been working politically full-time for 6 years. And I've learned a lot over that time. And one of the things I've learned is the most important thing in politics is grassroots. It's actually people, feet on the street, organized, capable, enabled to be effective where they live. But that is actually what moves this country. And there's no shortcut to it. There's no shortcut to people showing up and being seen and voicing their opinions together. That is something if you want government of, by, and for the people, that includes by. That includes human participation by Americans around the country to hold Congress accountable. Look, I made this argument that we had a huge impact in 2018. Now we need to hold them accountable. If we made this huge difference, now we want to see you perform. We don't want you to say the win was getting elected. No, that's not the win. The win is being effective. The win is producing for the people. That's the win. Holding office may look good in your obituary, but being effective is what you got elected to do. And there is not any time this is the crisis in America. We're going to talk about a lot of things, and they're really important, and I care about them a lot, and I'm sure everyone in this room cares a lot about them. Whether it's healthcare, or taxes, or free college, there are a lot of issues on the table in America today. But and climate, absolutely. But this is the issue we need to deal with first. Because until we get rid of this guy, we're not even going to be able to, we can talk about all that stuff, but nothing can happen. And let me say this. People asked me twice in the last week, people who live in Washington, D.C., they said, are you lonely? And I said, well, you got to understand, the vast majority of Democrats agree with me. So when I flew out here on Saturday afternoon. So I'm going through the line at the airport to have my bag scanned and to have them make sure that there's no metal on my body. And the guy who's doing my bag goes, "Have I seen you?" And I go, "Need to impeach." And he goes, "Right on, I'm with you." And the guy at the scanner goes, "I signed up and my wife signed up." So am I lonely? No. The vast bulk of Democrats are absolutely behind. How could I be lonely? I said to these people, look, you live in Washington, D.C. When I'm in Washington, sometimes I am lonely. But when I'm in the 50 states of the United States, I'm cool. And that is true. But let me say one other thing, starting out. This is not magic. The result may be magic, but the way it happens is work. You know, I am a big fan of John Wooden, who is a basketball coach. And what he said was, you practice as hard as you can, you prepare as hard as you can, you compete as hard as you can, you leave everything on the field, and you have nothing to be ashamed of. And that's what we have to do. We have to leave everything on the field without knowing how it's going to turn out, but knowing that what we're doing is a reflection of who we are and what we believe. So that is what we're here to do, is actually to make sure that we are all as effective as we can be, so that you guys understand. I know that a lot of you have organized in the past, and I also know that a lot of you haven't. And we want to make sure that everybody knows how to tell their own story and connect it to the bigger story, that everybody knows how to speak to the press, they know how to speak to members of Congress, that you can be as effective in every facet of this campaign as possible. And let me say, the rules that I've learned, I was saying, I believe in grassroots. It's funny. What I've learned in politics is the exact opposite of what I thought I'd learn in politics. Because I think what I believed growing up is that to be effective politically, you have to be manipulative. And you have to be deceitful. And that's what it is to be political, is to somehow be a successful fake. But actually what I've learned is that, I don't know whether it's changed because of the extreme ubiquity of social media and the idea that there's no privacy. But what I've learned in politics is that the only defense is the truth. That the only thing you can do is be truthful all the time. That you have to do what's right because everything else will fail. And you just have to keep on coming. And that is what we're going to do. We are going to tell the truth. We are going to be resolute. We are going to do what's right, and we are just going to keep on coming until we remove this man from the White House. And the last thing I'll say is this. This is the start, but you guys are the hope. You are the hope. You are the people who can make this happen on the ground. That's why we're so excited that you're here. Because for this to work in America, we need Americans to lead broadly. And we need you guys to be leaders in your communities and to go back and inspire your friends and people you don't know and people you do know. And to show everybody in this country and around the world that we still believe in the values of America, that we cut across every line, geographic, party, race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, that Americans want to do the right thing together. And if we can do that, we will shock this country and we will shock the world. Thank you. We've got to engage people. I will be working full-time for social justice. We can do this. Americans need a government of, by, and for the people. We are not going to win this in one step. We're going to have to win something, and then we're going to have to win something, and then we're going to have to win something. That is democracy.
How about now? All right, cool. So now we're going to move on to talk about impeachable offenses. And there are some folks here from Free Speech for People who are going to walk us through all 10 of them. So you know exactly how to talk about them when you're talking to your friends and your representatives. So without further delay, I'd like to welcome our friends at Free Speech for People.
I'm the co-founder and president of Free Speech for People. Can't hear me? It says it's on. Can you hear me now? Want me to use the handoff? All right. We're back up here. How's that? Is that on now? Okay. How about that? I'll start over. Good morning, everyone. My name is John Bonifaz. I'm the co-founder and president of Free Speech for People. Free Speech for People is a national nonpartisan organization launched on the day of the Citizens United ruling of the Supreme Court more than 9 years ago and dedicated to defending our Constitution and reclaiming our democracy. For the past 2 years, we have been co-leading a campaign calling for impeachment proceedings against President Trump based on his repeated and egregious abuses of power. More than 1.4 million Americans across the country have joined this campaign, and it is backed by a legal advisory board of prominent constitutional scholars. We are proud today to join with the Need to Impeach campaign in convening this summit and to present this panel discussion on the legal grounds for impeachment proceedings against President Trump. We have 3 panelists for this discussion: Ron Fine, Jennifer Taub, and Ben Clements, each of whom will be making opening remarks. We will then open this up to questions from all of you. I will briefly introduce each panelist before he or she speaks. You can find more about our panelists in their bios in your summit packets. Much of what you will hear today is more fully discussed in the book, The Constitution Demands It, The Case for the Impeachment of Donald Trump, which Ron Fine, Ben Clements, and I co-authored, and which Melville House published in August of last year. And you can learn more about the book via a flyer in your summit packets, as well as by visiting our website for this campaign, impeachmentproject.org. We thank our partner, Need to Impeach, and all of you in advance in helping to distribute our book tomorrow to every member of Congress, along with the articles of impeachment and a proposed congressional resolution for starting impeachment proceedings, which we have drafted. So thank you. They're looking forward to receiving those packets tomorrow at the House of Representatives. We will now hear from our first speaker, Ron Fine, all the way to my right. Mr. Fine is the legal director of Free Speech for People, where he oversees the organization's legal advocacy program. Mr. Fine previously served as Assistant Regional Counsel in the United States Environmental Protection Agency's New England office, where he received the EPA's National Gold Medal for exceptional service. Mr. Fine will discuss the impeachment process and the definition of an impeachable offense, and he will discuss the legal grounds for impeachment proceedings against President Trump, focused on the president's actions promoting bigotry and hostility and undermining constitutional rights. Ron?
Thank you. Can everyone hear me all right? So impeachment, I want to first talk about the process, because it's important to understand it's a three-step process. The first step is not specified in the Constitution, but it's something that Congress has developed over the course of 2 centuries, and it's an investigation through a committee. Nowadays, this happens through the Judiciary Committee of the House of Representatives. And that's important to know because in your packet, the very first item that we are providing to members of Congress is a resolution that could be passed today to start that investigative process. And through that investigation, the Judiciary Committee can subpoena documents, can subpoena witnesses, and at the end of the process, which could take well over a month, could be 2 months or even 3 months, the committee would then recommend articles of impeachment to the full House of Representatives. That brings us to the second step, which is the part that's technically called impeachment, which is when the House takes a vote by a simple majority on whether to vote for these articles of impeachment. If the House does that, then we go to the third step, which is a trial in the Senate. And if 2/3 of the Senate votes to remove the president, at that point he's removed from office and can be disqualified from ever holding an office of honor, profit, or trust under the United States for the rest of his natural life. So what is an impeachable offense? Well, our book, The Constitution Demands It, discusses this in great detail. But the other book that's important is the U.S. Constitution. And the Constitution says that the president or any federal official can be impeached for treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. Now, treason and bribery are pretty well defined, but the phrase high crimes and misdemeanors has led to a common misunderstanding, and this is important to dispel, which is that if you watch the news, a lot of people talk as if high crimes and misdemeanors have to be federal criminal offenses. That's not true. They can be. There can be a strong overlap between high crimes and misdemeanors and what we would think of as crimes. But in fact, the framers of the Constitution brought that phrase over, which had a long history in England where Parliament would conduct impeachments. And it is not limited to federal crimes. That's an important understanding. Virtually every constitutional scholar who's ever looked at this issue agrees with it. Congress itself agrees with it and has impeached or conducted impeachment investigations against many federal judges for things that weren't actually a crime in terms of the criminal statutes. In fact, even Richard Nixon, some of the articles of impeachment against him included conduct that was an abuse of office, but that did not violate a criminal statute. And that's important because impeachable offenses are serious. They are offenses that subvert the constitutional order, and they are plainly wrong to a good citizen or a person of honor, regardless of the words on the statute books. That's not my definition. That's the definition of a classic textbook on impeachment published in 1974 by a Yale law professor. And it applies today just as it did then. So I'd like to briefly talk about the outline of the impeachable offenses that Trump has committed and for which the House Judiciary Committee could start an investigation. Now, some of them are very well established as impeachable offenses because, for example, Richard Nixon did them before. That applies to obstruction of justice. Others have not had a direct history, but we know that they're impeachable offenses because, for example, the framers of the Constitution said so. That's true for example, abuse of the pardon power or accepting money from foreign governments. And then there are some that, quite frankly, are unprecedented because no president before Donald Trump ever thought to trample these lines quite as severely. And that includes several of them that we list in our book. And for example, reckless threats of nuclear war, recklessly endangering the entire planet, or abuse of office undermining the freedom of the press. We don't have a direct precedent for that. But I'd like to focus on 3 in particular that stem from a common theme of promoting bigotry and using his office, abusing his office to promote bigotry and sow discord based on race, color, religion, or national origin. So one that we've identified is advocating illegal violence and undermining the equal protection of the laws. And Trump started with rhetoric during the campaign trail that he's continued as president. And when you're president, words matter. And so his efforts to stir up hostility, telling, for example, police to be rough with arrested suspects, telling the military to study a story that turns out to be made up, but that if actually carried out would be a war crime. When the president says something, that matters. And so this is a category of offenses that includes his rhetoric that divides the country beyond a line that can be considered acceptable. For example, when he urges law enforcement officials to break the law, that crosses a line. A second offense that fits into this category is abuse of the pardon power. And he's done this from his very first pardon of Sheriff Joe Arpaio. Now, there's obviously a lot of political divisions in this country, but Joe Arpaio was the first person ever to be pardoned for the crime of criminal contempt of court for deliberately disobeying a court order to stop violating individuals' constitutional rights. And Trump did it not because Arpaio had expressed repentance and sought forgiveness. Quite the contrary, Arpaio stood tall in what he did, and Trump reaffirmed that by saying explicitly that the reason he pardoned Arpaio was because he was he was convicted for doing his job and he kept America safe. And finally, the third offense that fits into this category, which is the most recent in terms of when it happened, and we don't fully cover it in our book because it was just happening as we were finishing the book, but that's his abuses of power at the southern border. So Trump has a plan to limit immigration across the southern border of the United States. And obviously, there's a wide range of views on immigration policy. But what Trump has done goes beyond any acceptable policy differences. His use of the military, deploying the military to the border for a made-up crisis involving the caravan with no national security justification, and then as soon as the midterm elections were over, even though the caravan was still approaching, taking the military away, shows that he was misusing the military for partisan political purposes. That's impeachable. But the worst of all in this category is his policy of detaining children separate from their families. In many cases, the families had not even violated any law. They had lawfully presented themselves for asylum. In some cases, they'd entered illegally, which is a misdemeanor. So is, by the way, misusing the emblem of the 4-H club. It doesn't justify punishing the parents by taking away their children or punishing the children who've done nothing wrong. So Trump's policy of detaining the families and children separately under cruel and unconstitutional conditions, some of which can be fairly compared to concentration camps, is not only a violation of human rights, but it is plainly wrong to a good citizen or a person of honor, and it is grounds for impeachment hearings. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. Our next speaker will be Jennifer Taub, a professor at Vermont Law School and a member of Free Speech for People's Board of Directors. Professor Taub researches and writes in the areas of corporate governance, financial market reform, securities regulation, and white-collar crime. Professor Taub's first book, Other People's Houses: How Decades of Bailouts, Captive Regulators, and Toxic Bankers Made Home Mortgages a Thrilling Business, was published in May 2014 by Yale University Press. Professor Taub will address corruption and the president's businesses, discussing the president's ongoing violations of the foreign and domestic emoluments clauses of the U.S. Constitution.
Thank you so much, John, and good morning, everybody. Thank you. So, as John mentioned, I teach at Vermont Law School, and my work mostly focuses on the importance of full and fair disclosure and efforts to combat fraud and corruption. So you can imagine what an interesting field this entire Trump administration has been for me. The famous phrase from Watergate, "follow the money," is my mantra. And before I begin, I just want to make clear that I offer my remarks today solely as an academic and not on behalf of my law school or any other association. So as John mentioned, I'm going to talk about why Congress needs to investigate Donald Trump because he's been profiting off his presidency at the public's expense. And this isn't just immoral, it's unconstitutional. And this is because he's been violating the Constitution's 2 emolument bans since the moment he took office. And I know you've heard the term emoluments, but sometimes we like to refer to those provisions as the anti-corruption provisions in the Constitution. What I want to make clear is that folks keep saying, let's wait for Mueller. And I want to say no matter how long we wait, Robert Mueller, who's investigating potential criminal offenses associated with the role the Trump campaign may have played or been linked to the Russians who hacked into the DNC and the Clinton email system and so on, that investigation will never, ever reach violations of the anti-corruption clauses of the U.S. Constitution. Okay, so let's actually talk about what those clauses say. And I want you to be sure that, not to be ashamed that today may be the very first day you've ever heard the words emoluments clauses. You shouldn't feel alone. William Barr, who was just nominated to be you know where I'm going with this, the Attorney General of the United States by Donald Trump, at his confirmation hearing, he actually told the Senate Judiciary Committee, and I'm quoting, "I couldn't tell you what it says." So, you know, maybe he's out there listening to the live feed, and maybe I can teach him a little. I doubt that. I think he can probably just open up the Constitution itself, and starting with the foreign emoluments ban, he can learn something. The summary to think of as you think about this is the purpose of these anti-corruption provisions is to make sure the president is actually serving us, the people, faithfully, and not being induced by foreign governments or states or other parts of the federal government. It's about loyalty. Okay, so the foreign emoluments ban is found in Article 1, Section 9, Clause 8. And what it says in plain language is that unless Congress approves, the president may not accept any present or payment whatsoever from foreign governments and officials. And this predates, this concept, this anti-corruption principle predates the Constitution. It was in the Articles of Confederation, and it was modeled after a 1651 Dutch rule. And as Ron noted, it's quite clear that this was intended to be an impeachable offense, a violation. Edmund Jennings Randolph at the Virginia Ratifying Convention for the Constitution said if the president is discovered having done this, taking emoluments from foreign governments or officials, quote, he may be impeached. The founders really wanted us to prevent foreign influence and corruption, and the concern, of course, is that financial dependence or any kind of business interest the president may have could impact his foreign policy decisions. And we can see that we're concerned about that right now. And to be clear, the word emolument covers any financial benefit, including ordinary fair market value transactions. So we're thinking about lease payments on buildings that the Trump organization might receive, room reservations, rebroadcasts of programs like The Apprentice, and other similar business ties where money flows to the president from foreign governments. Now, in the book, there are many examples, but I'm going to just highlight a few, including some recent ones. Keep in mind that there are over 100 Trump companies that do or have done business in 18 countries and territories around the world. It doesn't matter that the president's sons are apparently managing the enterprises. Management is not a word that comes up in the Constitution. We're talking about the flow of money. Follow the money. Another example is foreign payments at the Trump International Hotel in Washington, which has become an emoluments magnet. As you may have read recently, the president, who has a lease to the space, which is really our space, it's owned by the government, he was investigated, and a couple years when he first took office, the General Services Administration said it was not a breach of the lease, that he might be perhaps violating the Constitution. But just a couple weeks ago, the Inspector General kind of slapped them back and said, no, you really you really need to look at the potential constitutional violation here because it might be a breach of the lease. Other examples of what's going on at this specific hotel is the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia rented 500 rooms to U.S. veterans. We also have in Kuwait, held this National Day of Celebration at the Trump International Hotel. We also have at Trump's other properties, like the Trump International Hotel in New York, it apparently was not doing very well. And in an email that was leaked, the manager of the hotel said their revenue for the first quarter of 2018 finally grew because of a last-minute visit to New York by the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. Just a 5-day stay turned around their dismal finances. Okay, I could go on and on, but we're not just talking about stays at his hotels. We're also talking about things like his various golf courses. For example, his Trump National Golf Club in Northern Virginia hosted the Turkish Airlines World Cup, sponsored by the state-owned Turkish Airlines. We have extensions of credit. We have foreign trademark approvals that he's given. We have foreign government permits and other approvals. Now, sometimes you hear people defend what he's doing, saying, well, he paid back the profits. Well, in February of 2018, the Trump organization sent a $151,000 check without any accounting behind it to the Treasury, and claimed that it represented the profits from these businesses and hotels. But that's not really a remedy. The Constitution forbids taking these payments without approval, right? And profits isn't what we're talking about here, as anyone who's ever run a business understands. Paying salaries, like your son's salaries, comes out before the profit is ever calculated, for example. Okay, there's also the domestic emoluments ban, and sometimes we call this the presidential salary clause. And this is found in Article 2, Section 1, Clause 7, and this is basically an outright prohibition on the president receiving any payments from the U.S. government or the states beyond his official salary. Have you noticed that he often makes quite a bit to do about the fact that he supposedly doesn't draw a salary? Yeah, well, he's finding other ways to make money, and he's not supposed to be doing that. So, for example, he used his position as president to attract members to the Mar-a-Lago Golf Club, right, down in Florida. Initially, the membership fee before he was president was $100,000, then it went up to $200,000. People are paying for access. So, I guess I'm gonna wrap things up and just say that there are also, as you may have heard, some private proceedings under the Emoluments Clause. The most successful one right now is the state of Maryland and the District of Columbia suing the president and related just to the Trump International Hotel. And the district court said they could go ahead with discovery, meaning they can start getting financial documents from the Trump organization, but the Fourth Circuit stayed that, meaning stopped it in December, and there's soon going to be a hearing to see if that can move forward. But even if that case moves forward, that's just one property, right? And that is not a substitute for all the other ways in which his grifting is unconstitutional. So what's important now is that an impeachment investigation happen. There's no other way to prevent him from stopping what he's doing, which is profiting at our expense. He's engaging in foreign policy and perhaps domestic policy activities that are really putting himself and his family first, and not us first, we the people. So I believe Congress must not use a special counsel investigation or other legal cases as excuses to dodge their obligation to conduct an independent impeachment investigation. This abuse of power, the corruption, and the threat to our republic are here now. Now is the time to act.
Thank you, Jennifer. We will now hear from Ben Clements, the chair of the Board of Free Speech for People and the chair of the board's legal committee. Mr. Clements is a former federal prosecutor and former chief legal counsel to Massachusetts Governor Deval Patrick. He is a founding partner of Clements & Pino in Boston, the law firm in Boston. Mr. Clements will discuss the legal grounds for impeachment proceedings against the president, focused on his campaign's conspiracies to corruptly obtain the office and obstruction of justice. Mr. Clements will also address why there is sufficient basis for Congress to proceed with the impeachment process now without waiting for special counsel Robert Mueller to complete his federal criminal investigation. Ben?
Thank you, John. Good morning, everybody. Great to see everybody here. As you've heard, Donald Trump has been engaged in a whole slew of impeachable offenses, and he has been violating the Constitution and his oath of office every single day. He is committing impeachable offenses right now as we all sit here, and he will keep doing it until he's removed from office. I'm going to talk about 4 other categories of impeachable offenses beyond those you've already heard about, and then I'm going to talk about why Congress needs to act now. The framers of the Constitution didn't spell out the definition of high crimes and misdemeanors, but they did identify certain things that they viewed as clearly impeachable conduct. And one of those was any criminal or corrupt activity used to obtain one's office, such as used to win a presidential election. It's now clear that Donald Trump did precisely that. In fact, Donald Trump engaged in at least 2 separate criminal conspiracies to help him win the Electoral College vote. First of all, the evidence has grown by the day, and it's now overwhelming that Donald Trump and his campaign conspired with the Russians to enlist Russia's aid in his election victory. From the high-level meetings between Trump's campaign officials and Russian operatives seeking dirt on Hillary Clinton, to Donald Trump's public and illegal call on Russia to release Hillary Clinton's emails, to dozens of clandestine and suspicious contacts between Trump's senior people and Russia, the evidence is clear that Trump and his campaign actively participated in Russia's illegal interference in our presidential election. And while this was going on, Trump was overseeing another criminal conspiracy, directing his own lawyer, Michael Cohen, to make illegal hush money payments to conceal from the voters his extramarital affairs. And like the Russia conspiracy, this conspiracy did not end when he won the election. It continued for the first 2 years of his administration as Trump and others on his behalf repeatedly lied about the existence of the payments, the nature of those payments, and about Trump's knowledge of those payments. And the efforts to conceal these criminal conspiracies leads to yet another major category of impeachable conduct, and that's obstruction of justice. Virtually every day, sometimes every hour of his administration, Donald Trump has done everything he can to undermine, to try to shut down the criminal investigations into his campaign, from firing Jim Comey to threatening to fire any other senior person with authority over this investigation, to dangling promises of pardons, to making threats against witnesses and their families. Barely a day has gone by where Trump has not engaged in an act of obstruction of justice. This is another area that is clearly established as an impeachable offense. It was the lead basis for the impeachment papers against Richard Nixon. And the 4th category of impeachable conduct also falls into that area. It is right out of the Richard Nixon playbook, and that is Donald Trump's misuse of federal law enforcement agencies to investigate and prosecute his political enemies. He has improperly urged the Justice Department to investigate, to prosecute Hillary Clinton, Jim Comey, Michael Cohen's father-in-law, any number of other people on his enemy list have been subjects of potential law enforcement action. and that is yet another impeachable offense that was one of the grounds for the articles of impeachment against Richard Nixon. Now, in the face of this massive evidence of a slew of impeachable offenses that you've heard about today, and we've just briefly touched upon it, as Ron said, it's in much more detail in our book. But in the face of this, we continue to hear from the political media establishment the constant refrain, it's too soon. We need to wait for the Mueller investigation. We need to wait for the so-called Mueller report. There's several reasons why that is just wrong. First of all, Robert Mueller, as important as his mandate is, has a limited mandate, and that is to focus on investigating whether federal criminal statutes were violated, who violated them, and whether criminal prosecutions should be brought. That is a very different and separate question from the question of whether the president has abused his power and committed impeachable offenses. That question is one only Congress can answer. Robert Mueller has no authority. Robert Mueller is not going to tell Congress or the American people whether Donald Trump has committed impeachable offenses. That's Congress' job. Second of all, Robert Mueller's investigation is limited to it's limited to obstruction of justice and the Russia investigation. It doesn't touch upon any of the 8 other grounds for impeachment that you've heard about today, including, as Jennifer mentioned, the emoluments clause, including the undermining of constitutional rights. And those individually and certainly collectively are grounds for an impeachment investigation, even without the Russia conspiracy and even without obstruction of justice. The third reason is that we cannot afford to wait. The Mueller investigation has moved at great speed. There has been a breathtaking flow of indictments, of convictions, but it is not wrapping up soon. It will go on for many months. It may go on for years. Meanwhile, the damage that this president is inflicting upon our country, on our Constitution, on our democratic order, grows by the day. So when the political establishment tells you, wait, you need to wait, we need to tell them, we can't wait. The American people cannot afford any more damage from this presidency who's ripping apart our Constitution, ripping apart the fabric of our nation, and undermining the rule of law. And even if we were to survive 2 more years of this reckless and dangerous president, the precedent that Congress is setting by failing to hold him to account guarantees that we will again in the future face lawless, autocratic, dictatorial presidents who recognize that Congress isn't going to step up. So if we're going to have a constitution, if we are going to be a system of laws and live under the rule of law, Congress must hold this president accountable. Republicans, Democrats need to come together and put country above party, put the nation's welfare and its safety and its security and its future above their short-term political considerations, and begin impeachment hearings now. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Ben. We will now turn it over to you all for questions, comments. There are people who have mics that are roaming around. Yes? Right over there? Yes, sir.
I didn't know it was the first one. Oh, hey everybody, how you doing? I'm Lawrence Nathaniel. I'm from South Carolina, the team is 64. My question is, I didn't think I was going to be the first one, but thank you. I got a lot of questions. The community, the people. By us fighting for impeachment and bringing the people together for that, how can we all move forward by connecting with a common cause, by actually calling our leaders, by actually moving our leaders to actually do something? Because as we know, Nancy Pelosi is not all for impeachment, but members of Congress are. And how can we push our Speaker of the House to get there so we can impeach this jackass? Sorry for my language. so we can impeach him, get him out of office, and this country can move forward together, and we can hit Mike Pence next.
Jennifer, you want to take that?
So I agree with your comment/question, and I think you are the answer. Tomorrow you're going to go out there and visit and make the case. Speak your truth, tell them why it matters, and you're going to make it happen.
Thank you. Next question. Yes, right up front here.
Hi, I'm Kay from Atlanta, and my question is, what is the fastest way to have Trump removed from office? I mean, I'm here, I believe in impeachment, but is that the fastest way? Because I believe in the urgency of what we're talking about, and we cannot wait for 2020. I mean, he should not be on the record for re-election.
The question, if you didn't hear, is what is the fastest way to remove Donald Trump from office? And I'll turn it over to Ben.
Thank you. Yeah, we agree completely with that premise. We can't wait. We need to move as fast as we can, and that's why we are pushing impeachment, because not only is it the fastest way, it is unfortunately the only way, short of waiting until 2020, the only way to remove the president from office is through impeachment in the House and conviction in the Senate.
In the back there. Yes. Somebody's coming with a mic.
Good morning, and thank you so much for this presentation. It's been insightful. It's nice to take it, to hear from someone and to kind of make it more tangible than doing a lot of reading. I guess my question is, with a list of, potentially 10 impeachable offenses, as these go to Congress, as the resolution goes, is there, I'm going to sound like Survivor-esque in strategy, is it best to go for all 10 of them? Is there a more powerful case for 2 or 3? And should our efforts be focused on, here are the 2 or 3 that have the most evidence, that are the most compelling, or is it sort of go for all 10?
Okay, Ron, do you want to take that?
Thank you.
Thank you for the question, which is it best to just focus on a few of the president's impeachable offenses or go for all 10? So I think the answer is to go for everything, and that's for 2 reasons. One is that the question that the House and ultimately the Senate will face is whether the president should be removed from office. So you want to look at his entire course of conduct. And the precedent for that is actually found in the Nixon articles of impeachment. If you've ever taken a look at them, people think it all had to do with Watergate. And there's one article that's focused on Watergate. And then there's another that lists a bunch of other things, not all of which involved Watergate. They brought everything that they had collected evidence on that was an impeachable offense. And the more that we build the case that it's not just one thing, not just 2 things, it's an entire pattern of conduct, I think that makes the strongest possible case. Thank you.
Okay, we had a hand right here, and then I'm going to go right back to you. Yes.
Yes, my name's Tracy.
Hold on one second. I'm going to give you a mic so everybody can hear you.
Hi, my name's Tracy Pease, and I am from Detroit. My question is this. We're talking about impeaching a president. However, we know that Russia went ahead and interfered in our elections. How is he legitimate? Why is he even there? And I mean, why don't we even have just a redo? How is this legal?
Why don't we have a redo? Do you want to go ahead?
Sure. So the answer to your question is he's not legitimate. He is an illegitimate president. And that is the number one reason why he needs to be removed. It would have been great if the framers had thought to include a redo provision in the Constitution. We really need one now. They didn't, but there are some legal theories that we have explored about a redo. But as we get further into this administration, I think the main goal now is to get him removed through impeachment, and at least we no longer have that lawless cancer running as a candidate in the next election.
I was just to add that there is also a legal argument to be made that if the president corruptly obtained his office, then the vice president doesn't get to become president in that situation.
And just to add one more point to that, because it touches on a question people often ask, which is, what about Mike Pence? Well, if indeed Congress does what we're asking them to do and moves aggressively into an impeachment investigation, there is ample evidence indicating that Mike Pence is going to be swept up in that one way or another.
Okay, we had a question right there, yes.
My name is Carol Brockington, and I'm from Aiken, South Carolina. And to add on what this young lady was saying, Trump, he promoted violence while campaigning by having people beat up in his campaigning. He promoted bigotry. He promoted racism. Everything that he's done now, can we go back from his campaigning and add all of this stuff in to double jeopardy him?
Just to be clear, when we talk about impeachment, we're just talking about the activity that during the presidency, and absolutely his undermining people's civil rights, the overt racism, all of it is what makes him unfit for office, I believe.
Yes, if any members of Congress tomorrow or their aides tell you that the evidence that occurred before he took office is not relevant to impeachment, they're wrong. They need to read what the framers said on this. The impeachment power is there. If you corruptly obtain the office, you do not get to stay in office. We have a lot of hands here. One, way in the back there, purple shirt. Yes, you. Yes.
Well, I had the opportunity to deliver a package to my congressman.
Sorry, can you add?
Well, I had the opportunity to deliver a package to my congressman.
I believe that everyone here is going to have that opportunity. Is that correct? Need to impeach? Yes. Yes, I believe that's what's happening tomorrow. Yes, in the back. Right there, yes.
Hi, I'm from Palm Beach, Florida. Is there a lot of Floridians? Hi! Okay, we're still hurting. We lost the election in November, unfortunately. But I was reading an article last night from Newsweek that said that not half of the country is ready to impeach him. And what bothers me is that this room and the 7 million people are ready to impeach him, but there's like half the country that's not. And is that a huge factor trying to persuade them? Because you have some diehard Trump supporters. They don't want to hear it. They, see no evil, speak no evil, talk no evil. But it's disheartening to know that it's been, but in a way it's kind of good that it's visible. It's visible how people really feel about fellow Americans. But how is that going to affect the impeachment process?
Yes, thank you. Ron, go ahead and take that.
That's a great question, and we do talk about it in the book, but let me give you the quick summary. First of all, you're right that there are some diehard Trump supporters who will never abandon him, even if he does shoot somebody in the middle of Fifth Avenue. Just for some context, Richard Nixon, on the day he resigned, had 25% approval. So there's going to be 25% that are never going to give up on Trump, and yet that wasn't enough to save Richard Nixon. Now, it is true that right now the public support for impeachment is a little less than half. The last poll I saw said 46%. But just to put that in context, in the case of Nixon, the Judiciary Committee started its impeachment inquiry at a time when the support for impeachment was less than it is now for Trump. Do you see what I'm saying? There's already more public support for impeaching Trump than when the Judiciary Committee started an impeachment investigation of Richard Nixon.
Yes, we had a question way in the back near the camera. Yellow plaid. There you go. Yes.
Hi, I'm Callie from Michigan. So my thought is that I think when we start getting into this, people are going to start bringing up the impeachment of Bill Clinton, because that's kind of the last thing that happened, and everybody's still really concerned about what they were doing. I think it would be great to hear you guys talk about how that situation is different than this situation, and how what he did, even though he lied, which is, I guess, technically impeachable, how that's different than like what Donald Trump is doing, so that when we start confronting people who are in the middle and to the right, we can talk to them about why the difference between the two and why this particular situation is worse.
Okay, great. Ben.
Sure, thank you for that question, because it's certainly one that you do hear from time to time. Look, I'm not going to defend what Bill Clinton did that resulted in him being impeached. I don't think it was defensible conduct for a president. Do I think it was conduct worthy of removing a president from office? I don't. I think reasonable people maybe could differ about that, and you could make a case that it was enough of an abuse to remove him. But when it comes to Bill Clinton's conduct versus Donald Trump, let me be clear. There is no comparison. Bill Clinton lied about one particular thing that he had engaged in privately, inappropriately to be sure, and it was over and done with by the time it came to light and he faced impeachment. Donald Trump engages, as I've said, in impeachable conduct constantly, and it permeates everything that this man does. Jennifer talked about what the framers were most concerned about was loyalty. Who is he loyal to? He is loyal to himself and to his foreign benefactors led by Vladimir Putin. He is not loyal to the American people. So with Bill Clinton, we had something that he should have been censured for, as he was. With Donald Trump, we have a danger to our country that will continue to be a serious danger until he's removed. He must be removed.
Okay, we are out of time, but I just want to close. Yes. Okay, let me call on you, and then we'll be. I'm being told up here, please wrap up. So that's why I've got to do it. But okay. One more question. Yes.
Yes, my question is, there are two parts to this. You have impeachment, and then you have also the breaking of the law. And this man is making a mockery of the law. And we're saying that no one is above the law, but he's doing all of these crimes, and yet we can't find a reason to indict him. As much time as he spent on the golf course and watching TV, then, you know, it's just a joke. And I just graduated from law school, and I'm saying, what is this degree for if we can't use it to indict him and get him out of there? Because impeachment is political. But indictment, this is the law. And we are supposed to be a country of law. So when is that going to take effect?
Thank you so much for your question. And that's right, impeachment and the criminal justice system differ. We think of impeachment as a preventive measure. We're trying to remove a president from office so they stop harming us. The criminal justice system is a system of punishment. And the question as to whether a sitting president can be indicted is still undecided, although there's a Department of Justice policy where they say he can't. There are many legal scholars who say, yes, he can. We just need to see what happens going forward on that front as well. But I agree with you. There are two different processes, and they both need to happen in parallel. We should not allow the whole criminal justice process to be the only process, because we need some way to remove him from office, and that only way to do that is through impeachment.
Can I just add one point to that? And there is one thing that is clear. While it's not clear whether a sitting president can be indicted, it is very clear that once impeached and removed from office, he can and should be criminally prosecuted.
Okay. Thank you all. I'm being told I need to wrap up here, but we're happy to continue to talk with you after this session. So please come up if you have additional questions. And I do want to thank you all again for going to Congress tomorrow, delivering those packets to every member of Congress. And I just want to say in closing, this is not just about Donald Trump. This is about us. Who are we as a people? What are we as a nation? In the face of this constitutional crisis, we must rise. We must rise in the defense of our Constitution, in defense of our democracy, and in defense of that bedrock principle that no one is above the law, not even the President of the United States. The time for impeachment proceedings is now. Thank you very much.